widen our horizon and know our colleagues, in other universities, in other places. So we are really very lucky to have Dr. Miles here. Dr. Miles is a graduate of Cornell University. She is now professor in Washington State University, and her specialty is vegetable. She is a vegetable specialist, but she has a strong interest in alternative crops and organic production. She has been working with vegetable grafting since 2009 and has mentored 4 graduate students and published 7 journal articles and 6 extension bulletins on vegetable grafting. She also has a very wonderful web page on vegetable grafting, and that is actually how I got to know her. And when I contacted her, I was very happy that she said yes. I asked her to come and speak to us about her expertise. So Dr. Miles is going to talk to us about the different vegetable grafting techniques and why grafting. So we are going to go now into the work of science of grafting. Thank you, Dr. Miles.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Troya, for inviting me, because you're absolutely right. I didn't know where Lincoln University was. And it's just really been a pleasure to work with Carrie and others, from the grafting team, grafting is basically centered in this part of the country until really California came online a few years ago with their grafted industry. So it's just been interesting to see the growth of the vegetable grafting status in the United States. I am the extension specialist for vegetables in Washington State University, so I do try to, a lot of my focus in my program is to try to put a lot of my information on my website for extension, as extension publications, but also I have documents for extension agents and master gardener program coordinators for them to do their programming. So if you're interested in vegetable grafting or any of the things I work on, and you're looking for extension type of information, by all means, do contact me and let me know. We're all about sharing information. That's what it's about. I'm located at the Mount Vernon Research Center, so I'm 400 miles off campus, all the way in the northwest corner of the United States, 3 miles from the coast and at the edge of the earth. You can see Russia from my doorstep, maybe. Not really, but I'm sure you all know the line. So I'm at a research center. We're 9 faculty. We have 17 graduate students. I have 7 graduate students in my program, and so several of them work on vegetable grafting. It's just part of what I do, but it's a big thing. All right, so I'm sure you're all familiar with a grafted vegetable transplant. It just gives you an idea of what that looks like. So there you have the rootstock, there you have the scion, there's the graft union, and there's that clip, which if you're not familiar with yet, you are going to be very familiar with by the end of the day, and certainly by tomorrow. And so solanaceous crops, the ones that we work with in my program, are tomato and eggplant, but also we're going to be starting looking at pepper. And as Carrie said, I think pepper, at least in my very limited experience, is a little bit more difficult to work with. So I think anytime anybody takes on a new crop, this is something you should all just be aware of. You're just maybe not going to have the same success that other people are going to have. Some people may have great success their first time. Other people are going to struggle. And I just read a quote in the Wall Street Journal this morning as I was reading the paper in the lobby. It was about rooftop gardening, rooftop farming. I don't know if anybody else saw that, but the last thing that the individual being quoted says was, plants are not widgets. You can't just plug them into any situation by anybody and expect them to work exactly the same. So you just have to give yourself time to really work through all the details. And you're going to see lots of details of information on vegetable grafting from all over the world. And you're going to have to pick and choose what you're going to do, and you're going to have to pick and choose what works for you. So I really encourage you to try different things, not take anything as gospel, because different situations are going to call for different needs. So really, take your time. Cucurbit crops, the ones that we work with predominantly, solely is watermelon, and then also cucumber and melon, cantaloupe, and other melons are also grafted. So those are the common plants that are grafted. Different grafting techniques, that's what I was asked to just focus on in this presentation here. Splice grafting or tube grafting is the most common method used, certainly for solanaceous crops, and that's the other point I'm going to make, is you're going to see different names for the same method. So I used the name splice graft when I got into grafting 6-7 years ago now. We just looked for the common names that I thought seemed to be more descriptive on the grafting technique. And splice graft is the very common name used worldwide, so that's the name that I use in my program. But it's equivalent to tube grafting. You're going to see the names interchangeable. So used for solanaceous crops One cotyledon graft is the most common method used for watermelon, so it's a splice graft with a little bit of a tweak, and I'll show you these. And then there's the whole insertion, which is used for cucurbit crops, and I think Sanjun, that's what you'll be talking a lot about. It's not a method we use in my program. We tried it, but we don't use it. And then there's approach grafting and cleft grafting. So I'm going to just go through these different techniques. These are probably these are the majority of grafting techniques used for vegetable crops, and I'll just show you what they look like. So grafting equipment, the #1 tool used to graft vegetables worldwide is that double-edged razor blade right there. Snap it in half, and you get cuts on this end of the blade, and then you turn it over and you get cuts on that end of the blade, and we get about 400 cuts per blade. So it's incredibly cheap, it's very available, so all around the world I've taught vegetable grafting in several countries, and you can go to any marketplace and you can find that blade. It's the best blade because it's the thinnest blade and it's the sharpest blade. That's really why it's the preferred grafting blade. But the other attributes are it's very inexpensive and it's very available worldwide very easily. So that's what the majority of people use to graft plants. There are some other tools you can buy. This is out of Japan. It gives you the angle right there. You hold it perpendicular. It gives you your 45-degree angle. We're kind of shifting our angle a little bit on some of our crops, so you have to shift your angle on how you hold that, but very easy. The problem with this tool, in my opinion, is when I bought this, it was $115, but then the blades themselves are tens of dollars. And by the time you add that all up, and those blades are thick, they don't last long. I just don't see this as being cost effective, but it's a great tool to think about. And then these are other things that you use, scalpels, and then these are just probes used for the whole insertion grafting. Reusing clips, these are the grafting clips, so this is what we use for solanaceous crops, so these are thin-stemmed plants. Cucurbits, we use the spring-loaded clips right there. We reuse all of our clips, so we wash them 10% bleach solution, rinse them, dry them, and they're just reusable over and over and over again until they break or whatever, but basically they're going to go on for years and years. Sanitary practices, we certainly just have general sanitary practices, clean hands, clean workspace, but this is not a sterile technique. We're doing this in the greenhouse, we're doing this with soil, we're doing this with live material. This is not like tissue culture, right? Not at all. So this is a greenhouse-based practice. But you do want to be wise about, how clean you are. Many people like to use gloves, many people don't like to use gloves. So that's just a natural preference. What I find is that if you've got any allergies with tomatoes or cucurbit crops, then I find that people like to use gloves just to protect their hands from that. Or if you're doing lots and lots of plants in general. But most of the workers I see in the grafting houses, I don't see anybody wearing gloves. So certainly not required. So I'm going to just walk through this really quickly here. All of this information is available. You have my slides. Everything is up on the web. It's all in extension publications. But I'm just going to walk you through the stages of grafting here, what you can expect. Generally, plants are grafted, seedlings are grafted when they're 12 to 28 days old. Understand that every time you plant any given seed lot, it's going to change as to how many days it's going to take to reach grafting stage. It can change by 1 day, it can change by 4 days. So we all make plans, and then you have to look at your plants, and then you have to adjust. That's just the way it works. And you're going to be seeding scion material, and you're going to be seeding rootstock material, and you're going to plan to have maybe a 3-day gap, and one of them is going to grow faster than the other. Each time you do it, it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to have to learn how to adjust. So you learn how to slow plants down, you put them in a cooler area, you learn how to speed plants up, you put them in a warmer area, because they really have to you have to get them to match scion stem size as much as possible when you go to graft. So you can plan, and then you adjust, right? Great extension qualities. So the key to grafting and success is that you have the same matching stem diameter. So when you go and you cut your two plants apart and you put them together, that stem diameter has to match. And John had some fantastic photos showing you the cut apart of a stem, showing you the xylem and the phloem matching up. That's what you need to achieve. In order to get your xylem and phloem to match up, your stem diameters basically have to be the same diameter. Scion and rootstock, they don't germinate or grow at the same rates. Okay? There's just going to be variability. There's variability between your varieties. There's variability within a batch, a seed lot batch. There's variability in time of year. There's variability from year to year. There's variability. You're just going to have to be prepared for that. We always do a preliminary test before we do any grafting project, before we do any big propagation. We always seed everything a couple of weeks beforehand. That gives us some idea of what to expect, and then we plan accordingly. Seed more plants than necessary so that you have the selection to match stem diameter. So again, one of the keys to success is that you're going to sort your plants when you go to graft. Now we just sort as we go. Some people, if you're doing a lot of plants, you may sort the day ahead of time. So you have small, medium, and large perhaps, or maybe it's just 2 sizes. You don't measure them, you don't have to measure them, you just kind of have to get some idea before you sit down at the table and you're trying to sort through all of these. That's going to improve your efficiency on the day you graft. We get about 80 to 90% graft survival in general. I will say with our tomatoes, we're at 98% success. Hands down, every time, you can do it blindfolded. 98% success. So I don't worry too much about tomatoes. Watermelon, on the other hand, we get 80% on a good day, we get 20% on a bad day. We have had 85%, and so you just need to be ready for that. So if you need 100 plants, and you don't know if you're going to have 20% or 80% survival, and you've got an experiment going in, or you've got plots or something going in, and you know you need that 100 plants, then you better plant and graft, X number more. You got to be ready for that. So I always like to have a lot more grafted plants at the end of the day that I can give away, give to the master gardeners for their plant sale or whatever it is, than go into an experiment short. So you got to plan for those extra plants. And then another key is to water your rootstock and your scion plants the day before grafting, not the day of grafting. And that's because when you go to cut that stem, it's going to exude water. You're going to get a bubble of water coming out of the stem, and that's going to push the 2 stems apart. And that actually is a pretty major reason for grafting failure. It's just that bubble of water coming out. So look at your plants. You don't want them wilted going into grafting, but don't water them the morning of grafting. So water them the day before. All right, so now I'm going to just walk you through the grafting, just really briefly here, the major methods for grafting. So this is splice grafting. This is cutting the rootstock. This is just a tomato rootstock. You can see the tomato plant right there. There's the rootstock. 45-degree angle, cut below the cotyledons. You cut below the cotyledons because those cotyledons right there in the leaf axil, they have meristem tissue. If you cut above the cotyledons, you're going to get growth, shoots coming out of there. You're going to get rootstock growth. And you're going to pinch it out, and it's going to grow again. You're going to pinch it out, it's going to grow again. You're going to get rootstock growth to the end of that plant. So you simply eliminate the rootstock regrowth by cutting below the cotyledons, and that is absolutely key with solanaceous rootstocks. And then you put your grafting clip on, and you line your grafting clip. Again, John had a beautiful photograph, and I think it was John and or Carrie, and I apologize already. You had beautiful photographs showing the alignment of the grafting clip with the direction of the cut. When you're doing a lot of grafting, there are a couple of little steps that really make you very efficient. One of them is your grafting clip has a hole in it. You're going to line it with either the upside or the downside of your cut, so that you automatically know how to put in your scion. And maybe that doesn't make sense to you right now, but when you go into grafting, you'll see exactly what I mean by that. Then you cut your scion at exactly the same angle. So there's your scion cut at exactly the same angle as your rootstock, and you simply slip it into the clip. So that's splice grafting. It takes 10 seconds, maybe less, to graft a tomato, any solanaceous crop, 10 seconds if you're, take the time and think about it. So as Carrie said, this is really fast. This is really, really fast. This is not really where the thought process is, where the challenge is in grafting. There are huge challenges in healing, and we'll talk about that later. Grafting is very, very simple when you just talk about this part of it. So double stem grafting, John introduced you to that. If you hadn't seen that before, these are tomatoes in a greenhouse in Sicily with that double stem right there. So what they do is they graft and then they pinch the, within about 10 days after grafting, then you pinch the top of your scion above the cotyledons, and you'll just get the 2 stems forming. So you graft, you heal, about 10 days after grafting, you pinch, you get the 2 stems. And that's what goes into greenhouse production. So is there greenhouse tomato production here? The intensive production a little bit. So basically, I'm guessing it looks a lot like this. This is rockwool or core. I mean, you know, have different planting medias here. But this is really intensive production. It's usually 11-month production of these tomatoes, indeterminate varieties of tomatoes. And they're all using grafted plants. Certainly in Europe, I think almost all of the production systems use grafted plants for tomato. Then and again, John already gave this, so I don't have to talk too much about it, but for the double stem grafting of tomato with 2 scions, this is what we've done, but now I'm going to try what John said, so that was new to me. The inverted V. I heard it from you. So I'm going to try the inverted V next, but this is what we've always done, and it's tedious, but it's successful, and we know how to do it, so it works really well. So this is your rootstock. You pinch the scion at the top of the plant, just above the cotyledons. You get these 2 new stems growing. Oops, sorry. I thought I had my next plant there, my next photo there. And then you get then you graft your 2 stems and you get the 2 varieties on top. And this is really fun, and I look at this as a really kind of fun technique. It's a great, again, if you're into plant sales, I think this is a really good item as a plant sale item. Certainly for home gardeners, you get the 2 varieties, colored varieties, shapes, whatever it is, on the 1 plant. All right, so we're going to go to the 1 cotyledon grafting. This is cucurbits. This is the method that we use. Again, Sanjun is going to talk about the other most popular method, but I'm just going to touch on that here. This is what we do. This is the 1 cotyledon grafting method. It's the most simple, most rapid method that there is for watermelon or cucurbit grafting in general. This is what our rootstocks look like on the day of grafting. So this is the rootstock. You can see the first true leaf there is just emerging. This is our scion. It's kind of maybe a little bit hard to see there. There's 1 true leaf with the 2nd true leaf emerging. Those are the perfect size for grafting for us. So this is what it looks like. This is cutting the scion. So we cut the scion below the cotyledons. So you want to have both cotyledons left on the scion. We do this in 2 cuts, but a good grafter is going to just do this in 1 cut. Just takes us a little bit longer. And then you create your angled cut right there. Hopefully you can see that. Now this is where we're changing. We started at a 45-degree angle, and now we're going up to about a 65-degree angle. And this gives you, the wider your angle, the more surface area you have. And the more surface area you have, at least in our experience, the better healing success we have. So we've adjusted from a 45 to a 65-degree angle for our watermelon. Then you take your rootstock, and this is why it's called the 1 cotyledon method. You take your rootstock, and with 1 swipe of your blade, you cut down. There's the cotyledon and the top of the plant right there that you're removing, and you leave 1 cotyledon on, hence 1 cotyledon grafting. And the tricky part here is right in there is a nub of meristem. And if you don't get that nub of meristem out, that meristem will regrow, and you'll get regrowth. So usually what you do, at least what I've seen in the grafters, is you take your razor blade, that cut, right, snapped in half razor blade, you take the 1 edge of it, and you just do 2 swipes right in here, just swipe, swipe. And that usually is enough to just take that out. And then you continue on with your grafting. So then you take your 2 pieces together. Here's your scion on top of your the rootstock right there, and those are just placed together. And you can see that looks pretty good, right? I mean, you wouldn't know, if I didn't tell you, you probably wouldn't know that those were 2 plants. And that's because the stem diameter matches essentially perfectly, and that's the key. You've got to have perfectly matched stem diameter. Now you can cut your angles a little bit to kind of fudge, have a little bit of fudge factor, but then you have to think about that. And certainly on a grafting floor, you don't want to be thinking too much because that takes time. But if you're just doing a couple of 100 plants, you can adjust as you go. And then you put your clip on and you're ready. And then we also use the stakes. So John mentioned in their plants, they all have stakes. We also use exactly the same stakes. They're kind of like little drinking straws, basically is what they look like. I will say that we started with wood because I thought, putting wood out into the fields was a lot better than plastic. But we got a lot of mildew in the wood. So we had, the skewers, the bamboo skewers. We tried several different things. We bleached them, we sterilized them, but every time we used them, we got mold. And that mold went into the plant material. So that's why we use plastic. So I will mention that. John?
Do you find when you're making your cut that you have to be careful you don't go down too far because of the hollow stem?
Yeah, so there's a hollow stem issue with cucurbits, and I didn't want to get into too many of the gory details. Yes, so you do have to be careful. It's an art. I think that watermelon grafting, in my opinion, is a little bit more of an art. Tomato, anybody can graft tomatoes. I've done master gardener workshops where people have walked in, never grafted a plant in their life, and they walked out with 6 live grafted plants within an hour or 2. We heal them for them and everything, and they heal them for themselves, they report back, and as long as you follow the directions, you're successful. This is more of an art, I think.
Pande's son is 5 years old, and he did a tray of grafted tomatoes for us.
Yeah, a 5-year-old can graft tomatoes. It's easy. And so here are the stakes, just kind of showing you this is what our plants look like. So basically these are just drinking straws is what we got. And so we graft 1 tray at a time, and then that tray then goes into the healing chamber. So 1 tray of any crop that we're working on, 1 tray at a time. And then we leave, and this is not a good example to show you because this is for an experiment, but we graft every other cell, and usually those are interspersed. They're, kind of offset. But this has a different purpose here. And that's just to give more airflow around those plants, so when you put them into a high humidity chamber, you've got a little bit more airflow, because otherwise we tend to get disease issues build up. All right, so then I'm just going to introduce to you the whole insertion method, but Sanjun really is going to cover this. So what you do here, and I need to change out my slide here because this is not what we use. We started with a scalpel, and now we just use the traditional tool that I learned about elsewhere. So this is your rootstock. You take your sharp-pointed tool, and you basically just plunge down and carve out the meristem tissue there, and you remove that. Then you take your scion, which you've cut into a wedge, and you just insert it into your hole, and that's it. That's hole insertion. Now the problem with hole insertion is that you get a lot of rootstock regrowth, because it's really hard to kill. There's your meristem tissue there and there at the base of those 2 cotyledons, and there's a lot of rootstock regrowth from this method. There are other things you can do, but just as a standalone method, that's something you really have to worry about. This is hole insertion with the bamboo tool here, and this is a grower in California, just in the Vista area, not too far from Plug Connections. And so these are his cucumbers, and he's just demonstrating to us. I'll show you the next method is what he actually uses. But he showed me the hole insertion method. So he just uses a bamboo little stake there, carving out the hole. And he's just using there's that blade, that Wilkinson double-edged razor blade snapped in half. You'll see that all over the world in grafting operations. So he's shaving his scion to have that wedge. And then he's putting the 2 together. And that's it. And so it's self-supporting, so this is a real advantage of this. You don't need a clip necessarily. However, there are issues with this method with seedless watermelon. So this is from Sherry Kubota, who's at the University of Arizona. And so she just wanted to make sure you're aware of the issues with seedless watermelon. So if you've got growers doing seedless watermelon and you want to try this, just be aware that the seedless watermelon scion right here can be much larger than the diploid and other melons. And so the weight of that material just oftentimes just takes it out of the hole. It's just too heavy. So you either have to stake it or perhaps clip it or do something else. But it's a problem that you have to deal with. The other thing that Sherry wanted me to share with you is the fact that they have gone to this flat edge tool, gotten away from the pointed tool, and that gives you better control of the meristem when you're basically, cutting the living organ tissue out of the rootstock there. That flat edged tool just gives you better meristem control. That's really why, and a bigger hole to insert your scion material into. All right, so approach grafting. This is another method that's used by the California grower that I'll show you next year. This is what he uses for his cucurbits. And so here's your rootstock, here's your scion, and you can see what he's done here is just sliced into the stem of each. Then he puts the 2 together, and then he clips them together. And then once that graft, the scion there is well established, you can see heel over, then you cut the scion roots off. That's it. This is a very simple method. He uses this method because he gets very high success rate with this method. You get no rootstock regrowth because you're below the cotyledons, so that's really key. And so here it is in action. So hopefully you can see that. Can you all see that pretty well? Okay, there is the cut stem of the rootstock and the scion. and those are the plants, so he clips them, and so they're sitting at the table grafting all these plants, and that's what the grafted plant looks like. And then somebody then picks up that tray. When that tray is full, they pick up the tray and they go and they put them on the bench here underneath the cover, which is their healing tunnel. So that's approach grafting. Very easy, very successful. So kind of an easy way to get started. And then this is that plant in his high tunnel operation. So there you can see he transplants both plants, and there you can see the scion root stock is cut at that point. Do you see that? So there's no joining there. And then that's what his operation looks like. So this is Japanese cucumbers in California. This is in Vista, California, so not too far from you at Plug Connections. And he just has, I don't know, acres under tunnels in soil, and so grafting for soil-borne issues, and that's the method he uses. All right, so the last one I'm going to mention is cleft grafting. Again, a very simple method, and this is usually done the way I look at this is a method you can use. It's to rescue plants that you've missed your window of opportunity on, and you don't want to just throw them away. So if you want to take advantage of them, there's another method you can use, and it's called cleft grafting. So what you do is you cut your rootstock just straight across the top, put your blade in, and you can either cut a wedge out of your rootstock, or you just put the blade in and you wobble it a little bit, and that opens it up. And then you cut your scion into this pointed shape here, and you put the two together. Sorry. And that's what this is right here. These are cleft grafted eggplants, and again, it's the same operation in California, the Japanese grower. And so he just uses two clips, one here and one here, to keep the two plants together. And so this is what it looks like when he's grafting. So here's your rootstock material, and it's maybe a little bit hard to see here, but again, cutting the plant right here just straight across the top. And then here's the blade going straight down into the stem to open up that wedge. And then here he is shaving the scion, so you shave it into a point. And then you insert it into the stem and then clip it. Okay, that's cleft grafting. So we always seem to miss a window of opportunity at some point with our plants. You end up with plants that are too big for the other methods. You can do this. And this is for solanaceous crops, not for cucurbit crops because of the hollow stem issue. All right, so then rootstock regrowth is something you really have to think about. Here is eggplant with rootstock regrowth, and here is watermelon with rootstock regrowth. And hopefully you'll see that that's squash and that's watermelon, and so that's how you recognize you have a rootstock problem. The problem with this is those squash rootstocks, and I can tell you from my experience, you come and you see them, they're just emerging 1 week, and you go back in a week later and all you see is squash plant. So in 1 week, on a vigorous watermelon field, those squash plants will overtake the entire planting. They're that vigorous. So you really have to pay attention to this, and you really have to be out there to control. And so in areas where you don't have labor issues, if you've got accessible labor, if you can walk your fields, walk your plots, and remove rootstock every week, that's great. We don't have that kind of labor in Washington, so we're doing everything we can to minimize rootstock regrowth. So that's what a little bit of my research program is focused on watermelon, is looking at different grafting techniques, preparing those rootstocks in such a way that we can graft them to eliminate rootstock regrowth. So I wanted to just mention rootstocks because we've talked a lot about rootstocks, and hopefully by now you all understand, and I think you all do, that rootstocks are separate plants that have been bred and developed to be rootstocks. Now we have done, in my program, we certainly use tomato plants as rootstocks, and I think both Carrie and John perhaps mentioned that that's an opportunity that you can explore, and in my view, there's a lot of exploration there. All right? There's no rule against not using known plant varieties as rootstocks. Anything can be used as a rootstock. You just need to know what you're looking for, and you need to find those attributes, and you probably want to screen your material before you put out, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of varieties to choose from in any given crop you want to work with. So you probably want to decide what you're going to do to look for a rootstock, but again, to me, there's a huge opportunity here to look at rootstocks. And so also in my program, we're screening germplasm for cucurbit rootstock. So that, to me, is a great opportunity we have in the U.S. So in general, seed companies have been developing rootstocks in Asia for more than 80 years. These are bred, developed, known materials by these seed companies. Looking at solanaceous crops, Carrie mentioned this, they're hybrids for the most part. They're either intra-specifics, which means that they're lycopersicum by lycopersicum, or they're inter-specific, lycopersicum by Heberchides aethiopicum. So different wild types, basically, you heard that earlier. They're vigorous, they may lack germination emergence uniformity, this is for inter-specific. But they have that high vigor, but they can be a little temperamental on the germination, in my experience. So, as of last year, there were 65 tomato and 6 commercial eggplant rootstocks sold in the United States. Cucurbits, inter-specific hybrids, these are usually squash, bottlegourd, fig leaf gourd, winter melon, or other wild types. And as of last year, there were 52 different watermelon commercial rootstocks sold in the United States. So that's a lot of material to deal with, and nobody's doing a trial with every single rootstock, every possible scion combination you can imagine. That's just unattainable. So if you're interested in doing any of this work, you're going to have to pick and choose what you're going to look at. And you probably need to know why you're looking at this, so you have some idea of what to pick and choose from in the first place. So this information is all on the vegetablegrafting.org website, which is Carrie mentioned. It's the Vegetable Grafting Team website, our SCRI project. I have lots of grafting information on my website, so that's all there certainly for you to use. I did a series of PowerPoint presentations. These are narrated PowerPoint presentations to walk you through basically what I just told you. So if you're at all interested in that as extension opportunities, by all means, and then the fact sheets, and then the handouts. I have lots more handouts that I haven't put up on the website. So if you're doing grafting workshops, for example, we've got all the information, like a packet. If you want access to that, you're more than welcome. Just ask me. So then I'm going to just wrap up this presentation with why do we graft vegetables, and you already got a really good introduction to that from the previous two speakers. So primarily we're grafting vegetables because of soil-borne disease resistance. Worldwide, this is being Fusarium wilt. In my program, we focus on verticillium wilt. And then nematodes, as Carrie mentioned, is another primary issue when you look at soil-borne diseases. Increased vigor and yield, this is for improved water and nutrient uptake. This is really the greenhouse production system. If you look at Asia, most of their tomatoes in greenhouses, if not all of them, are grafted. Increased tolerance to environmental stress, so temperature extremes, high temperatures, low temperatures. So when temperatures exceed 95 degrees, for example, with the tomato, they're going to abort all their flowers. And more than just aborting their flowers that haven't been pollinated, the meristem tissue that is in the formation process will also be aborted. So if you've got high temperatures during tomato production, you can gain another 5-8 degrees Fahrenheit by grafting onto some rootstocks. And that's very important for some growers. So that's a way that tomato production takes advantage of grafting plants. Soil salinity. So I don't know, is that an issue that you have here, high salts? High tunnels. Water. So we just got back from Sicily. We did our international vegetable grafting tour in Sicily, and they've got EC values 4 to 5 times greater than what we would think is survivable for plants. And they're able to grow in those situations because they're using grafted plants. What they have in Sicily is an island. They've had so much water extraction that they have saltwater intrusion into their wells. So you've got saltwater intruding into their irrigation wells. And so you've got high salt water with high salts going onto their plants. Plus you have the high tunnel situation where you've got fertilizers, which tend to be salt-based, and you've got salt accumulation, especially if you're not removing your plastic, which most aren't, at least in my experience. So you've got opportunities for salt builds up there. So soil salinity is a really big issue, which grafting can overcome. And drought and flooding are two other issues that you can overcome with a well-chosen rootstock. So I just have some photos to show you some of those. This is my program in Vernon at Washington State University. This is taken last year, July 25th. These are my plots. This is a grafted watermelon, and that is a non-grafted watermelon, and that's the difference we get. It's enormous. So when I moved up to this site back in 2007, and I had a seedless watermelon, an icebox watermelon program that I've been working on for many years, and I moved my plots up, and come August, all my plots died, and I thought, okay, well, I'm just not doing this right. So I, planted it all the next year, and come August, everything died again. I was like, This is not me, there's something else going on here, and I come to learn that the field that I went into, so we're a potato-based rotation. Potatoes have high verticillium, but they're tolerant to verticillium. So we have high verticillium in the soil, but the potato crop itself doesn't exhibit symptoms. But when you plant a susceptible crop, it basically just dies. And so I looked at grafting. This is how I got into grafting, is grafting was a way for me to overcome verticillium in our soils in Washington. So this is what verticillium looks like, and fusarium wilt looks exactly the same. So when you're looking at plants, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. First you get this wilt coming, it's called flagging, the leaf flags. It happens from the tip of the vine down to the main stem, and then the next one goes. That's usually your first sign that you have a problem, and it's one of the wilts, and then you have to figure out which one it is. These are my plots. This is our screening cucurbit rootstock. So we're screening the National Plant Germplasm System accessions. We selected out several dozen germplasm to screen. So these are non-grafted rootstock. That is my susceptible control. That's Sugar Baby. So that's non-grafted Sugar Baby watermelon. And this is the 2nd of August of 2013. And a month later, there's Sugar Baby. And again, this is what happened to me year after year with my watermelon plots in this field. And those are the rootstocks. And you can see it's just a world of difference. And this is why we graft in my program. So just to give you some data on this, these are the disease severity. These are the 2 grafted rootstocks. We were doing a red line here, self-grafted. We were doing that as a control, which I have to say we dropped. We don't do self-grafted control anymore. This is a non-grafted disease incident up to 45%. And then the plants died. So it's not that we didn't get 100%, the plants were dead. So you stop measuring at some point because you don't have a live plant anymore. And so, and you can see disease incidence here was less than 5%. So it's just really clear in my program why we graft. This is, you asked about fruit quality. This is Richard Hassel at Clemson University. This is his work. This is fruit firmness with watermelon. And so this work is being shown all around the world now in numerous or several different research programs. So the gray solid bar here is non-grafted, and the striped bar is grafted onto carnivore. This is fruit firmness, and basically fruit firmness increases with the grafted plant. And this has a couple of different attributes. One thing is you can leave your fruit in the field longer, and the fruit doesn't deteriorate. So it gives you a wider window to harvest your fruit. You can narrow how many harvests you do. So you don't have to do everything 2-3 harvests perhaps. You can narrow that down to maybe 1 or 2 harvests. So that's a real savings in your labor. The other thing is when you pick those fruit and they go into a sliced cut market, they don't just juice out immediately. They don't fall apart. They stay firm on the shelf. So there's a good marketing payback on these fruit. And again, these data have been confirmed by other programs around the world.
Were those seedless?
Yes, they're seedless. Thank you. All right, this is Josh Freeman, University of Florida. And this is bacterial wilt. And so these are the non-grafted plants. These are the grafted plants. These are tomatoes in his plots. And again, they're just seeing a really, really clear benefit to grafting tomatoes for bacterial wilt. This is Jean Mayo out of the University of California, and hopefully you can see this okay. Those plots right there and those plots right there are grafted, and all of these plots are not grafted. So this is the large processing tomato industry in California, and they started experimenting with this 2 years ago. They're putting in grafted tomatoes for drought tolerance. So in California, I'm sure everybody's heard the drought situation in California. Water management issues are going to be enormous for the entire West Coast. I don't know how you all sit with that, but for us, drought is really what everybody is now planning the future for. And grafted plants enable them to apply the same level of irrigation that they were applying before. And with the added heat, they were losing their main crop, but the grafted plants survived. And now they're shifting over. It looks like they're shifting over the industry to grafted plants. So this is going to really drive the number of grafted tomatoes being produced in the United States, I think, just bumped up by millions. High tunnels. So this is the University of Vermont, and of course Carrie has, I think, probably one of the leading programs in the country on grafting for high tunnels. So grafting in high tunnels gives you the ability to have intensive cultivation where you have that disease and insect management that builds up because you're not rotating, which we understand why. but it gives you another opportunity to bypass those issues. Gives you season extension, the abiotic stress, cold soil temperature tolerance, and then they added vigor for heirlooms. And then the heirloom market, again, John talked all about this, introduced this to you. So I think there's a great opportunity for grafting heirloom tomatoes because you can provide that disease resistance that the heirlooms don't have. You can boost your productivity. Now, one of the issues that I just want you to be aware of, and this is work done by Aaron Grosskopf down at Florida USDA, and that is that this issue of incompatibility with this virus, tomato mosaic virus, which is abbreviated TOMV. That's what you're going to see in the next slide. So it's tomato mosaic virus. There's compatibility issues with rootstocks and scion materials with this virus, and you're going to have to be aware of this because you cannot test every possible combination of rootstock scion. So when you see these symptoms, this is something to think about. So this is her work. So what she's seeing is this is the virus symptoms here early on in the plant. And it looks like a virus. Hopefully everybody knows what a virus looks like. Curly, kind of warty type of leaves, discoloration. So you start to see early symptoms. But she said she wanted to point out that not every scion gives you the same symptoms. These plants here are having plant wilt. So these ones are giving you the typical virus-like symptoms. This is tomato mosaic virus, and you're getting wilting. So you wouldn't look at this and think virus. So it's just one more thing to be aware of. The issue is that when you look at the genetics on tomato mosaic virus resistance, there are a couple of genes. And the issue is that the TM2 resistance gene is not compatible with all rootstocks. And so what they're asking is that the seed companies confirm, and I apologize, oh my God, I'm sorry, the TM1 gene. TM1 gene is not compatible with all rootstocks. Sorry about that. So what they're doing is they're asking the seed companies, and most of these companies are in Japan, they're asking them to define which genes are they using for resistance, because that will then give you and anybody using grafted plants an idea of which combinations might not be successful. Because again, you cannot test every possible combination. So understanding the genetics behind the resistance on diseases is going to has another issue that we just have to be aware of. All right, this is Shin down in Florida, and her work is looking at yield, water, and nitrogen use efficiency in field-grown grafted tomatoes. And her work, she's looking at both for multi-for and then non-grafted Florida. And Florida 47 is standard variety for their fresh market And what they found is that they were able to boost their yields by 27%, which is pretty significant by using grafted plants. Increase the average fruit weight. And Carrie kind of touched on this, that looking at that yield and nitrogen relationship, I think most of us probably got into grafting thinking you could reduce your inputs and get good yields, but what the rest of the world is doing is they're optimizing their yields, and if that means increasing your inputs, then that's what you do. So you're able to get much more yield if you increase your nitrogen fertilizer, and your yield levels just keep going up. And so, just again, something to be aware of. Also getting improved water usage with grafted plants. All right, so is grafting right for you? Basically, the best advice I think I can give you, and I don't know, how many are you getting questions? Are you getting questions from growers asking you whether or not they should graft and what to do? Anybody getting those questions? Nobody? Okay, well I know I get those questions, and Carrie, I'm sure you get those questions, and Sanju and I'm sure we get those questions on a weekly basis, probably at least, certainly as we approach the season. And you've got to ask anybody who's asking, you've got to ask them, why are they looking at grafting? So there's so many opportunities for grafting, so many rootstocks, so many scions, so many combinations. You really have to understand why are you grafting before you can start to make recommendations of what to graft. So are you grafting in the greenhouse and soil? Are you grafting for a particular disease problem? Are you grafting for temperature issues? So you need to be, you have a series of questions that you need to kind of work through before you get to, well, this is what I think you should do. You need to identify the cost of grafting. So grafting costs more money. So if you're going to buy a grafted transplant, if you're going to make grafted transplants, you've got double the space in the greenhouse for a certain period of time that you have to pay for. You've got to buy the plant material. You're going to have to construct a healing chamber. But healing chambers are relatively inexpensive, but they're just, it's management, it's resources. Then you have to have the labor. So if you're doing 100 plants, this is relatively easy. But if you're doing 100,000 plants, those numbers add up. Then you have to look at the cost effectiveness. You have to understand that you're going to lose plants in the process. So you have to graft so many more plants than you actually need at the final run. And ultimately, you're going to have to compare your benefits to your extra costs. And you need to be able to make these decisions intelligently. And so there are lots of resource information out there. There's quite a bit of information resource out there for you. If you don't have it yourself, if you don't have it in your state, you've got it around you, you've got it nationally, you've got it internationally. So one of the things that we're trying to do on our vegetable grafting website is to try to compile all these reference documents that we have within the extension system in the United States so you can access them. So for example, we are just getting ready, I just got the proof as I was sitting here this morning, and our grafted watermelon economic budget. So how much does it cost to actually produce a grafted watermelon transplant, and how much can you expect to actually gain from using that grafted plant in Washington? So you need to start asking those questions on an economic scale. When is a 10% yield bump enough? 20%? Probably. 10%? I think you have to do the math. And I know as Carrie and others say, when you've got a live plant and a dead plant, it's kind of clear. Grafting helps. But when you just got a margin, you need to know what your margin numbers are. All right, so I don't know if we have time for questions. But this is Sahar. This is one of my graduate students. We work in the Columbia Basin. This is our large watermelon production area in Washington. So Sahar doing her data collection in her plots.
If you got time, temperature has been mentioned a couple of times, and high temperature issue. We have an issue that is very pressing here with cold early season soil temperatures, and everybody wants to beat that clock. And are you seeing an improvement? California probably doesn't count for this because they don't have the cold, but Washington does. Do you see an improvement in survivability if you plant earlier?
That's a great question, and I have to say I have not designed my experiments to look at that question. So what we've been designing our experiments to look at is to look at whether or not we get a yield bump. We put our plots directly in our commercial fields, and when that grower plants, we're planting. Mm-hmm. And he's usually not putting us in his very early fields. So I don't have the experience to know, are we getting a better survival rate in the early fields? This is a mid-season.
Yeah.
They tend to put us in their mid-season fields because they feel more confident in them. They don't want us to lose our experiments. Sanjun, did you have a?
I want to add something to your question.
Yeah.
If you look at the Chinese New Year, they're doing winter production and early spring production for cucumber and watermelon. And their main target is for cool harvest, not necessarily for disease. So to answer your question, yes, by choosing a good rootstock, you do bump up the cool harvest of your assignment.
Yeah, and I will say, to add on to that, so we just got back from Sicily, again, just off the coast of Italy there. And let's see, we were there 2 weeks ago, so end of March, and we were looking at watermelon that they were harvesting in tunnels, all grafted. And so, and I think they were grafting for a couple of reasons. I mentioned the salt tolerance was one, but then also they think that they get a better better yield with the colder earth. That's their early planting. But I haven't done the work.
How about in tomatoes? Anybody messing with that in tomatoes?
And again, my plots, I've not gotten a benefit in my plots, but I'm not looking at timing. Carrie?
In terms of early yield for tomatoes?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the sort of, I don't know if it's a challenge or just something to be aware of is with a lot of these vigorous vegetative rootstocks, that very first couple harvests are actually sometimes lower than non-grafted plants.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, they're going to fill bigger fruit. The plants are more vegetative, and the ripening process is senescence, right, of that fruit. So I don't know exactly why. Matt and I have talked about this for hours on end. Matt Kleinham's from Ohio State, and Carol could probably fill in more. But for whatever reason, those first couple of harvests, we oftentimes don't see as good a yield as we do with the non-grafted plants. So larger growers that call me, we usually tell them, why not plant a row or two of non-grass those are your first fruit, and then, you know, you can have your vigorous rootstocks for the rest of them.
Yeah, I will say, my tomato plots, and I've got open field and high tunnel, I've never had an earlier harvest from the grafted plants.
Right.
But again, I'm not looking at earlier planting dates, I'm just going in with, when our growers go in, that's what we go in, so we're not trying to push the envelope that way.
Yeah, I was at a grower yesterday and said, oh, did they get frosted? And I said, yes, they did.
Yeah, I tried a little bit on that side because when we do research setting, we try to grow them same time. And your seedlings got injured during the heating process, so there'll be damage to that. That's going to be reflected by the early yield. So I did a little demonstration, so I actually planted the grafting material a little bit earlier. So, and the stage from the greenhouse, transplanting stage in the greenhouse will be similar to unrooted versus transplanted. And I didn't find any trouble with early yield.
Gloria,
Thank you.
lunch is here, it'll take about 1 minute to uncover it. Want me to do that while you take some more questions?
Do you have a question?
Do you want me to uncover lunch?
Oh,
while you
no,
take
we
another
have one more
question?
presentation.
Another presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.